You are listening to
The Shredcast.
No tendies, baby.
It's the health code for snowboarders.
Let's send it.
Welcome back to the Shredcast, everyone. Today I have Cameron of Ridge Athletics AZ. So if you didn't catch it by that name, local to Flagstaff, which if you didn't know, that's where I live, and also graduated from the same university as me. So super stoked to bring Cameron on. He's an endurance athlete, mostly specializes in running, but also skiing and a little bit of mountain biking. And he is a physical therapist, an orthopedic physical therapist specialist that works with all kinds of endurance athletes in this realm. So wanted to bring him on, talk a little bit about sports injury and performance training, injury prevention. So welcome, Cameron. How are you doing this morning?
Thanks, doing great. Got my cup of coffee and ready to go.
Hell yeah. Well, cool. I just want to start off with like your expertise and how you like got started as an endurance athlete. You've been one your whole life. So even prior to physical therapy, what kind of got you into that like outdoor endurance realm?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a long story. So I guess I'll give you a short version of it though. Basically, like back in the day, that like if we took it way back in like eighth grade, I got into running mainly to like lose weight. I was kind of like a bigger kid. So I took up running just around my block a bunch. And then I learned about like the local cross country team just at our middle school. And then, I mean, kind of from there, everything just kind of like spiraled down towards physical therapy. So, got to high school, was doing track and field in high school, a little bit of wrestling and cross country, did that all 4 years, got to college. Wasn't fast enough to run in college at all. But from there, I kind of like took a turn more towards doing longer distance stuff. I had a mentor. My cross country coach ended up being my mentor kind of like throughout college. And he started getting into this like really long endurance stuff. I like watched him. He like invited me to go out and watch like this 100-mile race that he was doing. So I went out there and, at the time I didn't think of it or like think anything of it. And then like a year later, I was signing up for just like really long endurance stuff, did like my first marathon, then I did my first like 50-mile, then it just kind of like kept going on from there.
Mm-hmm.
So once that started, just got super into endurance running. And Flagstaff was kind of like the hub for it. This is like the running mecca of the world. You have every recreational athlete here, and you have, every elite athlete who's a runner knows what Flagstaff is. So it's like this is where everyone comes through. So it was a great place to get into running, specifically trail running. So spent most of my time doing some trails. And while I was up here too, we have our little local mountain snow bowl. So I I started with snowboarding. So I snowboarded for several years and then eventually transitioned into skiing. But over the course of all of that, there was like a myriad of just like random injuries that kept popping up. And, I just kept asking myself the question, how can I like align my like endurance outdoor athlete life with like a career? And the thing that I just kept coming back to was physical therapy. So I just saw it as a means to be able to constantly work with people who are like me, who are passionate about the same types of things, who just kind of like respect and admire the same types of things. And it just kind of like led me down towards the path of PT.
Yeah, that's super sick. And I think it's cool because there's so many PTs in the world too. Like, I mean, granted, from what I've heard, the profession's kind of declining a little bit in terms of filling up spots. But in the past, it used to be something that was really hard to get into. There was a lot of people coming out as PTs, and then they all kind of work in this clinical setting. So I think it's really cool to take a different approach and be like, I'm going to work with endurance athletes. I'm going to work with outdoor recreational athletes and have like a specific niche down realm. Doesn't mean you couldn't work with those other people, but I think it's cool to just be like, yes, I'm doing PT, but I'm also going to bring in performance training, and I'm going to get people like even farther than what normal daily function is. And like, we're going to go run a 100-mile race, which by the way is insane. I can't even believe you ever did that.
Yeah, it was a different it was an interesting time for sure.
I would die on site. But yeah, super
No,
cool that you got into that. And like, I just think that there's so much that goes into PT, obviously, and like you know a lot more about that than I do, but I think it's cool that there's a realm of it, and I think it's coming about a lot more now that people are like, we're going to take aspects of PT and I'm going to niche it down to a specific thing or like interest that you have. And then we're going to take someone who maybe has like a severe injury and we're going to take them all the way to basic function. And then we're going to keep going with that, which I think is something that's definitely newer to the profession. Would you agree?
Definitely. And yeah, like you're saying a lot of things right now that I have a lot of opinions about. So it's great because it's so true. I mean, PT has become this incredibly clinical type of realm, and I put in my time there, right? Like I've worked in a hospital, I've worked in a skilled nursing home, and I've worked in an outpatient clinic where we saw, just like the general population, and that's great. And I think any PT you ask, you will kind of like agree that, there is like a little bit of like that back end type of work that you have to put in before you can like really narrow things down into exactly where you want to work, and I did that for several years, of just seeing, not necessarily the people that I, am passionate about seeing, the people that inspire me. And it wasn't, until recently where I, took the step towards like really working with the people who I enjoy working with every time, who like inspire me when I talk to them, where we can get out of that clinical realm and make it more into that like athletic realm. Because it's like it's especially working with athletes, it's, if you're just in that clinical realm, like you're going to get them, back to maybe doing what they're doing, and they might be, a little bit more pain-free. But I think it's like super important to take that extra step and get them well into that realm of like prevention, well into that realm of performance too, because it's, those athletes are just going to keep coming back to you if, you're not taking that like very thorough approach to it. So to be able to have like the time and the intention to like take a step back, focus on one, getting them better, two, diving into that whole other realm of injury prevention and performance. It's so much better for one, myself, my sanity, treating patients in and out, outside of that clinical setting, and for my athletes as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, I kind of want to talk about that though, and I want to connect it to like the listeners that are here, whether you're coming from Cameron or me, so you're snowboarder, skier, runner, anything like that. Obviously, these all connect along the same realm of endurance, whether it's muscular endurance or like aerobic endurance. So how do you kind of take an injury prevention and rehabilitation like approach to your training in PT? Like what would you recommend for someone that maybe isn't necessarily needed for specific PT? Maybe they're not necessarily coming back from an injury, but they're really looking for like that performance realm and how to increase their performance in their specific sport.
Yeah, that's definitely a great question. And I think it definitely like boils down to what the person's goals are. So if someone typically when I am working with someone, we'll always start off with just like asking about their goals. Okay. That always has to be a guideline in order to like guide what you're going to do for training, what you're going to do for performance or prevention. If your goal is to run, a 5K, right? Your program is going to look a lot different in terms of what you're going to need, what you're going to need for prevention, what you're going to need to be able to excel. If your goal is to run 100 miles, or if your goal is to be able to like, ski downhill super aggressively every day, or snowboard, or go do backcountry, like all those things are going to look super different. All right. And generally from my realm, people are coming initially like with an injury. So we'll try and take care of that first. But once we get into that performance type of area or that prevention type of area, and we've kind of established some goals, it's going to be setting up like a really thorough routine of consistency. And I think that's probably the most important thing. Like there's so many different like training philosophies out there, and there's so many different types of like programs that you can be doing in order to like achieve performance or to improve your injury prevention throughout your sport. But the number one thing that you need to have is consistency. And if you're not going to have that, it doesn't really matter what program that you're doing. It's not going to work out super well. All right. So for all of my athletes, I always, once we start talking about prevention, once we start talking about performance, we nail down consistency. So let's get you like working out in the gym, like 2 to 4 times a week,
Yeah.
and for a lot of people initially, like 2 times a week is a lot. Like it's hard to do that. So it's scaling it up. Like you maybe start 1 time a week. And I think end goal, like people are doing really well once they're like really consistently hitting the gym 3 to 4 times a week. Okay.
Yeah.
And establishing like a really strong foundation of strength training. And then on top of that, once you've kind of developed like consistency, once you've developed like, some like foundational strength, then starting to add on some of that like sport specific stuff, so if that's running, we might do a lot more single leg stuff. We might do a lot more single leg single leg squats, some like jumping, some plyometric stuff, if that's skiing, we might do, I mean, a lot of it looks kind of similar.
Yeah.
I'm sure too, like it's, once you get well into the realm of like sports that are pretty, I mean, just like outdoor sports in general, I guess. A lot of stuff starts looking kind of similar. There's going to be slight differences with like skiers and snowboarders. Maybe we'll do some like more impact stuff for runners, and maybe we'll do a little bit more like, load absorption type things for skiers. It really depends on what their goals are.
Yeah.
And within that too, it depends on the type of like skier. Like if they're like trying to like, jump down like 20-foot cliffs and stuff, or if they're just trying to like get down the mountain without like, a crazy quad burn that's going to like sit them down for the rest of the day, that's
Yeah.
going to look super different, right? So, but I think those beginning steps are just like setting up consistency, getting a really good foundation of strength, and then you can start adding on that sport specific type of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Well, how do you think your experience in endurance things? I know we haven't really touched on it, but you do a little bit of skiing endurance races. So is that like uphill type of stuff, or do you do more like downhill? I don't really know the skiing realm, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. So skiing realm can be pretty diverse. I do all of it.
Okay.
So I mean, I downhill ski probably most often. So just like, your classic, like all mountain alpine skiing. So, anything at our local mountains, snow bowl. And then I'll usually go on like several trips throughout the year, and this year we're actually going to Whistler too, which will be a super sweet trip. Yeah, I'm super stoked for that, except they have 2 weeks of rain in their forecast right now.
Oh
So
God.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about it yet.
This has been an awful winter.
It's been a very unique winter for sure. Yeah, I've been in Flag for 13 years now, and this is the slowest start to winter we've ever had, and it's not looking great. So
Really
um,
not.
we'll see where it goes. Yeah, so like I do a lot of downhill skiing. And then I also like tie in, yeah, my like endurance life and outdoor athlete life with some uphill. So if you're not super familiar with uphill, that's like throwing on some like skis and skins, just like things on the bottom of your skis. And I was seeing if I had any drying in here, but they're all dry and they're in the garage now. But so whether that's like doing it like locally at Snowball, just like going up their typical groomed runs, and getting like a couple thousand feet of vert over like a mile and a half, and then coming down and doing like a few laps of that, that's going to get like a little bit of my skiing kick and a little bit of my endurance kick. I've ventured a little bit into like the skimo type racing, which is very different than longer endurance running events. It's a lot more challenging to manage equipment while you're like exhausted.
Yeah.
And that just looks like like anywhere between like a 18 and 25 mile race, where you're just like constantly skins on, skins off, skins on, skins off, a bunch of different transition times, a lot of vert, trying to manage nutrition, trying to manage effort, and conditions too. Like last year I did one called the Power of Four, which is out in Colorado in Aspen, and it goes up all 4 Aspen mountains.
Oh my God.
And it's just, yeah, so there's like 4 peaks, and there's so many different like transitions of taking skins on, putting them off, and coming down like some backcountry stuff, coming down some like groom stuff. I remember like doing like a 4,000-foot climb, then having to come like down the Highlands Bowl, like in their like double black moguls on like little skinny sticks too, because you're not on your classic downhill skis with this stuff. You're on like, I think mine are like a burly uphill setup. Like there are even lighter ones than mine, but mine are like 80 millimeters underfoot. So they're pretty skinny. They're like that skinny, but there are people
Yeah.
who have like 65 and they're really light too. So coming down really aggressive, choppy stuff in that is like can be kind of challenging.
Oh yeah.
It takes a little bit, especially for that kind of stuff, it even takes like a little bit more like thought about like specific strengthening and a lot of stability work too.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
you kind of answered my question. I was gonna say, how does like your experience in your endurance, like athlete sports, whether it's running or skiing, impact like how you approach training other people for endurance? Because I know like while a lot of what snowboarders and skiers do is just typical mountain riding, so like you're not doing a ton of endurance other than coming down. A lot of people deal with the like dreaded leg burn or knee pain just like while they're riding or things like that. So I'm assuming you've dealt with a lot of that from your clients. So I'm just curious like how your realm and what you've dealt with kind of impacts how you train other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the like I definitely have like a lot of experience in like, whether this is running or in skiing, just like knowing what it feels like.
Yeah.
And then trying different exercises to like mitigate, the symptoms that I have when I'm out like skiing or out running. And then like trying to incorporate that a little bit more into like my treatment for other people. It's like
Mhm.
obviously there's like lots of incredible stuff online and like cool exercises that I can look up or like
Yeah.
things like, think about and like create. But I think it's really challenging to connect with my clients and give them something valuable if I haven't like experienced it myself.
Yeah.
I think it's like a lot more impactful when I'm like, oh yeah, like I know how it feels to land from like that little like 6 foot rock over at Snowball and like lurch forward and feel that like strain in my back.
Yeah.
And so I can think about exercises that will start to incorporate a way to train for that, a way to control landing like that,
Mhm.
and be able to, yeah, give that to my clients. Same thing with running. It's like, all right, I know what it feels like at mile, like, you know, 82 of a 100-mile race. I know exactly what things you're feeling in your ankles, your knees, your hips. I know that your feet are swollen. I know every freaking
Yep.
step feels like your like leg's gonna tear off from your hip. And I know firsthand that when I do, like a lot of heavy type of training, that stuff feels better at mile 82. So
Mhm.
it's like I can incorporate that into my clients workload. And I think having that experience and being like relatable to it is super helpful for that.
Mhm.
So I think what I do, like personally, like 100% informs how I treat people,
Yeah.
just because a lot of it's experiential. There's like I said, there's so much you can look up and learn from other people, but you're missing a huge piece of the pie if you're not experiencing it yourself.
100%. And I think like that's where the pro is in going to a physical therapist that does what you want to get back to, or a trainer or whatever. Like I think it's so cool that that's now an option because for a while it really wasn't. And so if you have a specific goal to get to a specific sport, going to someone that knows that sport in and out is definitely going to be your best bet.
Right. Yeah. And that's even true of like, I mean, you've like our local gym, you
Yeah.
work out at New Roots and it has like, the strongest freaking people in Flagstaff in it. These people who are like deadlifting 800 plus pounds
Yeah.
and just
It's
doing
insane.
incredible things. And weightlifting wasn't like always or at least lifting like super heavy. That's never been like a huge part of my life. I've always like tried to lift functionally, one, to be able to like support the events and like the activities that I do and be able to do them well and like pain free.
Mhm.
um but it's like since being at New Roots, like in working with some like indoor athletes, people who
Mhm.
are like power lifters and stuff just occasionally. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to step back and maybe just try some of this a little bit just so I can like see what they're feeling. And it's like trying to take up like a little bit of that powerlifting, only at a
Yep.
fraction of what they're doing, just gives me like an idea of like, oh yeah, I can see how your hips feel at the bottom of that. Or like, I can see like where you're feeling that like shoulder issue at the top of that, like, bench press or something like that. Um,
Mhm.
so I enjoy like jumping into the things that my clients are doing. It's like I'll always like really focus on the things that I like doing. But if
Yeah.
there's something that I truly like can't relate to that a client's talking about, I'll give it a try. And just because I find so much value in it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I think like that's a really cool aspect of whether it's physical therapy or just being an athlete or doing physical things in general, is that you are basically testing your body's ability. So even if you've never done it before, you're like, oh, well, let's see if I can do this. And I think like that's a really cool aspect of literally just athletics in general, of like you get to this mindset. And of course, like some people train for aesthetics, and that's great too. Like I honestly don't find a problem with that if that's what you want to do and that's what you find joy in. But I do think that there's a whole other aspect that gets me like really going, that I think is super fun. It's just like, where can my body handle things, and like how far can I actually take it, and can I work up to like going even farther than that? And I think like that's a really cool experience to get to do. And I think like being an endurance athlete, I'm sure you can relate, because I mean that's probably more mental than it is physical half the time, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like truly I feel like if you can run a marathon, you can run 100-mile race. Like it's like there's so much of a mental component to it.
Yeah.
And I mean you're gonna feel like crap no matter what. Like I've
Yep.
never talked to any client or any friend who's run like 100, or even there's like a fun race up here called the Cocodona 250 that starts
Uh-huh.
in Black Canyon and finishes in Flagstaff, and it's 250 miles.
No, thank you.
But it's like no matter who I talk to, no one gets through the entire thing saying like, oh yeah, that was like fine. My body, like it wasn't my body that like gave out, you know. It's like usually the mind, you know. So
Yeah.
many people, it's like there's just so much highs and lows, like lights and darks. And you know, if you like hang out in that dark cave for a long time, I mean, things are gonna not look super well for you. So like so much of endurance training and so much of like athletics in general is just, you know, trying to stay on top of those little like troughs that you know you're going to go through.
Mhm.
And that's true of anything. And honestly, I even find that like relatable to like my clients too, in terms of like injury. It's like every person that like anybody who does sports, right, encounters an injury. Like rarely do I meet someone who, I mean, if I'm meeting them, it's because they've gotten injured, but rarely do I like meet someone who has done any like a sport their entire life and not had like a significant injury, whether it's like an overuse injury or like, you know, an ACL tear skiing or something like that.
Yep.
And it's kind of like the same thing. It's like training for your sport has a lot of highs and lows. You know, there's a huge mental component to it. Like a lot of people have the physical capacity, but that like mental hump that people have to get over, whether due to an injury or even just like getting to the gym, you know, and that's just like life in general. There's just like so many highs, lows, and there's always going to be like mental barriers to performance, to prevention, to into actually doing your sport.
Yep.
And you know you're going to be better for it in the long run if you can develop, you know, good strategies for really just like overcoming some of those like mental humps.
Yeah. Do you have any strategies that you've used that you've liked? In my mind, I'm kind of relating it to fear almost, because that's such a big thing a lot of people I talk to deal with. Obviously, like I do a lot of freestyle riding, and so many people that follow me, that work with me, want to get into freestyle riding. And the biggest thing that they struggle with is just the fear of not wanting to do it because they're afraid of injury. So, like, having been someone that's dealt with injury and deals with a lot of people with injury, that fear, I'm sure, is like a really, really big component of whether you're coming back or even just trying to get back to your sport. And you're like, well, shit, I hurt myself before. Like, what's stopping me from hurting myself again? So, what would you say to someone that's possibly in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because yeah, fear and like uncertainty of like what's going to happen is they're huge players for sure.
Yeah.
um I mean, the probably best thing that I can say, you know, if you're like really struggling with fear is, and you want to improve, right, is just kind of like analyzing, you know, what your goals are, right? If you are, you know, trying to really improve and fear is like a major block. Okay, I guess if I had to like sum this down in like 2 words, it would just be to like send it, right? Um, fuck it. But truly, it's like, I mean, truly, that's what it is. Like at the end of the day, you just kind of like, if you really want to get better, if you really want to like overcome something, you just have to do it. And that will get better over time, right? The body is really good at adapting and desensitizing. So it's like if we do an event that's like super fearful and we have like a big, like, sympathetic response to that's like really ramping up our emotion where we don't want to do it. Once we get over that barrier, the next one's easier. Like the next hump smaller, the next hump smaller, the next hump smaller. Yep. Right. Yep. And injury and risk are just part of the game. People aren't outdoor athletes because they're looking for a safe way to exercise,
a fun way, an adrenaline rush.
Exactly. If that was the case, then everyone would just maybe do like, indoor cycling or something like that, or little at-home workouts, which is great. It's great for like getting your exercise routine in, but it's like, I don't go ski. Like, I don't go ski because I want to like come home at the end of the day and say like, that felt, that was like a nice little workout. Everything was good and, move on. Like, I want to go out there and I want to get better. I want to perform. I want to be able to like try new things. I don't want to necessarily get hurt and I don't want to take, unprecedented risk. But I'm willing to take small calculated risks in order to improve, my skiing and my ability to have a lot more fun, and this actually just happened like last weekend too. I was in Purgatory with like a few friends and I was trying kind of kicking myself because I got a little hurt. I just gave myself a high ankle sprain because I landed super funky from a 360 and my foot got caught and it twisted my shin. And I was like, man, I shouldn't have done that. Like, I don't need to be doing 360s and like doing like crazy, like just doing stuff like that. Like I should just like chill. But then I was like, no, like I'm not out there to just like be cozy and hang out. Like I want to try this stuff. Like I want to have fun. So sometimes you just got to do it and know that there is some risk, but know that there's always, if it's minor, of course, like there are ways to recover from it and there are ways to learn and improve and grow. But the best thing is like, just truly trying it. And then the next time is going to be easier. And there's actually a good amount of research that supports that that initial mental barrier is like what we might call like a wall, right? You have a drastic improvement in how you handle that wall once you've like overcome it the first time, right? And you see this in like things like I don't know if you're like familiar with cold plunging much.
A little bit. I don't do it often because I'm a baby, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. But if I had to relate it to, there's like a podcaster, his name's Andrew Huberman. I listen to some of his stuff because it's like there's a lot of like science-backed stuff, and he describes like that initial like just the thought of having to go in and do something that's uncomfortable or do something that's like fearful. We might describe that as a wall, right?
Yep.
And then just overcoming that is going to drastically improve your ability to handle that wall the next time. Right. Yep. So you're going to improve that mental capacity. So like just jumping into things, doing things, and then it'll be better the next time that you try it.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if you've seen it, and no one listening to this, unless they ride a snowmobile, is going to know what I'm talking about. But there's this stupid little handrail in Roundup Park right now that like the other day I was hiking and I was like super, super close to lacing it and it was just great and I was having the best time of my life. But like getting to the point of hitting that, I was like, oh, absolutely not. Like you're riding up to it and you're like the gap between that lip and the handrail is huge. Like that's a huge jump on, like blah, blah, blah. And then you do it once and you're like, oh, well, I touched it. Okay, next time I can like actually sit on it and next time I can make it to the end and blah, blah, blah. So it's just getting over that last thing. But 100% it's that first initial thought of like, and I've dealt with this so many times and I'm sure you have too, is you have that thought of like, I should be able to hit that, but I'm too scared to, or I want to jump off that cliff, but like what happens if I don't make it? And I think the biggest thing that people need to realize is that if you think you can do something, but your mind's telling you maybe don't do it, if you decide to do it, commit 100%. Because where that injury is going to occur or where like anything bad that might happen is because you did not commit to it. So I think the biggest thing is if you want to get over fear is commitment issues. I have commitment issues, but like that's the biggest thing you have to do and take from this 100% is if you want to reduce your risk of injury, commit to whatever you're doing.
100%. And I was like, right before you like said the word commitment, I was like thinking exactly that's what I wanted to say next. It's like,
Yeah.
and if you're not going into it 100% committed, like a lot of these like jumps and a lot of these like, features in a park or even just like natural features on the mountain, they take 100% commitment and they
Oh, yeah.
take confidence, right? Like if you don't go into it and you're like, you're like 80% in, you're going to hurt yourself. Like, because either you're
100%.
not approaching it with enough speed, you're not going to get enough pop, you're not going to get a great landing, you're going to be fearful and like lean back towards the mountain and just like slide out of a rail and eat it really hard on the rail. So they take like, 100% commitment and confidence, right? You just can't overthink it. You just got to like go into it, be like, I can do this. And then you do it and it's great.
Yep.
You sit there and think about it too much, your commitment's going to go down, your confidence is going to go down, and then you're not going to land it really well. And then your confidence is going to go way down. Right.
Yep.
But if you like just commit that first time, then it all goes up.
Yeah, I always used to have like an escape plan. Anytime I would go into anything, whether it was a hard feature or natural feature, I'd always be like, okay, well, what happens if this goes wrong? What can I do? And then I would never commit and I would always just like tap something and come right off. And then I'd get so frustrated because I'd like build almost like this repetitive thing of like, oh, that's what I do every time I'm going to touch something. I'd get so frustrated with myself because I could never actually do it because I was never actually committing. And it wasn't until I finally was like, screw this, I'm going to land and I'm going to slide the whole rail. And then I was like, oh, okay, I can do it. And it's like, it takes that for you to be like, okay, I can actually do this. Like, why am I so in my head about it? And I think like that's just, it's so annoying that that is the answer because people are kind of looking for like something easier of like, well, I'm afraid, what should I do? And it's like, do it.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. And I think I see that a lot in myself too, like going off like features in the park or on the mountain. It's like anytime that I like don't land something super well, I can look back on it and it's like it's not because I couldn't do it, it's just because I didn't commit to it, right? It's like humans have such an incredible capacity to move and train and just do things great, but it's like we have such a limiting factor of fear and commitment, right? So it's like, every time I land something and I'm like frustrated, I'm like, why couldn't I just do that? And then I like think about it and like, it's just because I didn't commit to it. I had doubts right as I was going off the jump and I just didn't get all the way through it and it just didn't work out in my favor. But those times that are just like, you're confident and you're just like flowing and you're like, you have no doubt in your mind and it just comes so naturally, that stuff feels really good. And it's just when all those positive emotions are like flowing through you and not those like negative emotions that really just lead to injuries.
100%. Last thing I want to touch on is kind of on the same realm, and it's building that buffer for like a sport. And obviously, when I think of coming back from an injury and then going into performance training and injury prevention training to like get back to what you want to do, my whole goal is that you are getting better and creating a bigger buffer than what you will see in what you're doing. And I think like that can also be a confidence booster in that, like, okay, my body has like this much buffer, like I can have this much range of motion even though I might only see this much on the mountain, or I can pop with this much force even though I probably only need this much. So do you take like a similar approach? And if so, like how do you kind of get your athletes to build that buffer so that they can go and do their thing without like a high risk of re-injury or injury in the first place?
Definitely. Yeah. And I love the idea of a buffer. And I'll share, kind of like what I like to use as an analogy. But first I'll say like 100% depends on like the person, right? If like someone has like a significant range of motion impairment, then that's going to be, what we work on the most. If they have like significant like strength or like motor control or something like that issue, then we're going to work on that the most. But the way I really like to think about it is, I don't know if you've heard like the cup analogy, right? But this is like, you have a cup, okay? And this cup's just filled with a bunch of stuff, all right? And once the cup overflows, that's where you have injury. Okay. And that cup can be filled with a bunch of stuff. So it can be filled with like a range of motion impairment, a strength impairment, a motor control impairment, and an inability to absorb load when you land. And it can also be filled with a bunch of other stuff like nutrition, sleep, stress, all of this stuff. And once that cup overflows with all of that stuff and starts coming out, that's where you have pain and injury. Okay. So when I like to think about buffers, I like to think about how much stuff in this cup can we reduce in order to bring injury and pain well back into the cup. All right. So we might work on some of those range of motion impairments and lower how much of that's in there. We might work on some of the strength, lower how much of that's in there. And then we might, work on stress. We might work on nutrition and things like that. That just makes your body function a lot better, right? Because I'm sure you, as anyone, knows that like performance is not all about just like how well you move. A lot of it's just about the physiology off of which your body operates. So it's like, if we can reduce how much harmful stuff is in that cup, then you have the rest of that cup as a buffer for like let's say like a, unexpected trauma or load that really fills it up, that would lead to like pain or injury. All right. So it's like, I like to take the approach of trying to reduce as much of that stuff as possible. All right. And in PT, there's like a couple different philosophies, right? Like one of the philosophies is like, all right, we're going to change how you move and make you move with like better biomechanics. And that works for some people. And then a lot of people operate off of like adaptability. Okay. So we're going to adapt your body to be able to like tolerate the things that you're doing, basically make it more robust. Okay. Which is kind of like how I like to operate. I like to like make my clients just like more robust. And if they have biomechanical things too that really need addressing, then we can add that in. Okay. So you get like a little bit of like, let's change how you move. Let's make all of your tissue in your body as like robust as possible. Let's make you have more freedom of movement. So I like to hit it with all these different approaches. So they have multiple things going for them when they go out there and, encounter a situation where they might get injured. Right. We've increased the resiliency of your tissue, of your body. We've made you move better, and just made you, stronger as a human. And then it gives you a giant buffer.
100%. I agree. And that's the same approach that I take. So I think it's super important that people realize that it's so many different things and it's not just one. And I think like that stress and sleep thing is like, and nutrition is like one of the biggest factors that so many people miss out on, me included. I literally like tweaked my back the other day. I don't even know how I did it. I don't remember doing a single thing that would have hurt my back at all. And then I just like couldn't move, couldn't flex or extend, couldn't do anything for like 3 days. And I was looking back and I was like, well, I was stressed out of my mind, so it's probably that.
Exactly. And that's why I love like that cup analogy, right? Because it's like all of that other stuff probably stayed the same, right? Like your range of motion change, your strength, you didn't do anything out of the ordinary, but all of a sudden that stress went up like crazy and it just overflowed the cup and now you had a little bit of pain, right? And that's like, it's a good way to like talk about like injury and pain because it's so multifaceted. Like there's truly never one thing. It's such a complex mechanism, and it doesn't always mean, there's like a huge issue. It just means like maybe some things need a little bit more attention.
100%. And I think it's a great way to check in with your body too, to be like, okay, well, maybe these things didn't change, but maybe this did, or this feels different than it did before. And knowing that it's not just one answer, that you have all of these things that you can either build or reduce. And that will be a big factor in how your body and mind and everything like flows together. And then also a giant confidence booster, kind of bringing back to where we were before, in that, okay, if I know I have all of these things and I can work on all these things and I've improved them slowly over time, then you're like, okay, maybe I can go try that thing that kind of scares me because I know where I'm at mentally and physically. So let me just see if I can try it. And I think that that's like a great way to check in. And that's something that I did with myself of like, okay, well, I want to be able to get here, but my body's here. So how can I bring it here so that I can go try those things and be like in my head, I can do it. I have this, and this checked off. So like now I can go send it safely.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think this whole conversation too kind of like sheds light on the challenge of being, like people in our position, right? Where we're trying to like teach people how to be in tune with their body, and we're trying to teach people how to perform better and how to like prevent injuries. And, a lot of people, they want like, okay, I want this like, routine that I do every day, and that's going to mean this. And that's just not the case. It's like a lot of performance and prevention is checking in with yourself, checking in with your body, see how you're feeling and what things are on your checklist that you feel like you need to be able to perform well. And, I can't ever give someone like a set of exercises that I say like, okay, do this and you're like set. You're prevented, you're injury is going to be good. It's never going to come back. That's just not the case. But it's
Yeah.
like, you have to teach them, right? A lot of it's about education. It's like teaching people, what does injury prevention mean? All right. And what does performance mean? And that means adding in all these different components and understanding all of these different components and how they affect and build your body. And that's like the ultimate thing in the end for those realms.
100%, 100%. Well, sick. I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything. So for everyone listening, if you live in the Flagstaff area, Cameron does a lot of in-person stuff at New Roots, which is the gym that we both train at. So definitely go check him out. His Instagram is Ridge Athletics AZ. Definitely go follow him over there. Do you have any other social medias or places you want people to try and reach out to you?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm just on Instagram. And then I have a website, which is just Ridge Athletics AZ too. So you can always check that out if you have any questions about me or anything like that.
Awesome. Sick. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kaylee.